right. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining me from. Thank you for taking the time to be with me during this 1 hour or so. Pleased to be with you. Pleased to share with you what I know about how you can really extend the functionality of Azure DevOps ADO to be able to do a complete ALM functionality. The assumption is you all have been using ADO and you're familiar with the functionality there. Even if you're not using ADO, this presentation would be very easy to comprehend because we have many customers who are using or actually a lot of companies approached us who are using ADO, and they're looking for something more and beyond what ADO does. I've used ADO myself in other projects before I even worked with Rommana ALM. So the purpose of what I'm going to present today is really to show you if you have an ADO license and you're using it if you're already using it in your projects and you do not want to lose your investment within ADO, then you can go and purchase a license of Rommana ALM, and combining both of them together, you can get almost every ALM functionality that's available in Rommana ALM. You can get it from or for your ADO projects. So let me start by showing you this picture here. What you see in front of you is all the components of Rommana ALM, which are available once you purchase a license of Rommana ALM. In fact, you can purchase a license for any one of the components, or you can purchase license for just one component. So as you can see, Rommana ALM is a very comprehensive application lifecycle management system that does everything from requirement management and user stories and everything that has to do with them, to project management, with everything that has to do with estimation and timelines and milestones and deliverables and everything. It also does everything you need to do with issue management or bug tracking, if you wish. We don't like to call it bug tracking because issues, as you know, are more than just bugs. There could be a lot of things. That's why if you're using ADO, ADO has a concept of an issue and the concept of a bug. In Rommana ALM, everything is an issue, and then you can classify an issue to be either a bug or something else. Rommana ALM also does a lot of everything you need to do with change management, and change management here has to do with when a user story or a requirement changes over time, how is this going to affect everything else? All right, so it supports the concept of a change request submitted by a customer or by a stakeholder. It allows you to create to create a new user story or modify an existing user story based on the change request. Rommana ALM has great support of everything that you need to do with testing, whether it is test management or test design. It has a methodology that's called scenario-based test design, and also it has behavior-driven development that's embedded within the same methodology. You can keep track of all your documents, whether they are related to any of the other entities or not. So documents can be standing alone, or it could be associated with a user story or with a project management activity, with issues or whatever. If your project wants to use cases, then Rommana does that. So there's nothing really here that Rommana ALM does not do. It really covers the whole life cycle. You could go ahead and try Rommana for 60 days. Um, by the way, Rommana is an Egyptian word that refers to a pomegranate, and we have a metaphor for that. But you could also use just the issue management for free, 100% free. You don't have to pay for it. We make it available so that you can see the power of how to manage issues and bugs and everything else within Rommana ALM. But you could try any of the components or everything in Rommana ALM for 60 days for free. So now, forgive me. I know you did not plan to hear much about Rommana ALM this morning, but in order to show you the integration between Rommana ALM and ADO, I needed to show you what Rommana ALM does. Let's not also forget that Rommana ALM integrates with other things like QTP, or now called Unified Functional Testing from HP. If you want to run your testing or your test script automated, then you can push your test scripts from the test management component into UFT, and it gets executed there, and all the results gets pulled back into Rommana ALM. Rommana ALM also integrates with Bugzilla and Jira, but that's for the purpose of issue management. Again, we got a number of customers who have already used Jira and the Bugzilla. The Department of Education have used the Bugzilla for a long time, and they came to us and said, we'd like to use Rommana ALM, but we'd like to continue to use Bugzilla or Jira for our issue management. So we did the integration, so you could really, instead of using the issue management component from within that's available in Rommana ALM, you could actually store and manage your issues within either Jira or Bugzilla if you already have invested in these tools. If you have not, then there is no reason to, because in fact, the issue management component within Rommana ALM is a very comprehensive. It does everything. The last integration I want to point out to is SVN subversion for version control, and that keeps track of all the changes in your code, so that when a requirement or a user story changes through the change management, it starts looking at what kind of changes can happen in the code. All right, enough about Rommana ALM. Let me move forward. So really, this is a summary of everything I talked about. These are all the kind of things that are available in ALM, but you can do them in ADO projects now. The feature-based project management is a very unique thing. I did not mention it in my first slide, because it's managing your projects not in terms of tasks and who's doing what. No, this is mostly what we call a feature-based. Everything in, and I have another webinar I believe is coming in 2 or 3 weeks on this approach, feature-based project management. You could schedule, you could register for it if you wish. So that's a very powerful approach, very different from what Microsoft Project does, very different from what Jira does and other tools. There's a lot of things that we do in risk-based testing, how you select and execute the most critical tests as opposed to just running everything, because we all know that we never have enough time to do everything or to test everything in an application. That's why the scenario approach allows you to go and select the most critical scenarios that you need to test. All right, if you need me to elaborate in any one of those, I think I've said enough about them, but these mainly all the kind of things that are features of Rommana ALM, but now are available for your ADO projects. How does this work? In the integration, sorry, my screen forwarding is just weird. I'm not going to use the mouse for doing that. I'm just going to use my down and up arrows. Okay, so when you when you log into Rommana ALM, it allows you, and again, you could use this through your free trial. So you could have a free trial for 60 days for Rommana ALM, and when you try to log in, it'll ask you if you're going to log in using your Rommana credentials or your ADO credentials. If you log into Rommana ALM using ADO credentials, then the integration is going to work immediately. And the way it works is that we synchronized ADO projects into projects within Rommana ALM. So immediately once you log in, it will create a project for every, of course, it allows you to choose which projects within your ADO you would like to sync with projects in Rommana ALM, or you want to bring them in Rommana ALM. And it does go ahead and it creates projects for every one of your projects you select in ADO. Not only that, but also it goes and scan your projects within ADO, and it creates a corresponding entities within Rommana ALM. So as you probably know, if you're using ADO, ADO has a hierarchy of things. It has an epic, which is the highest level of functionality. Then it has a feature, which is a lower level functionality, and then it has user stories. That's the way functionalities or hierarchy works in ADO. Interestingly enough, speaking with people who have been using ADO, they say, but it's very strange that ADO allows me to create even an epic under a user story or a feature under a user story. I don't know how it allows you to do this. It's really weird because a user story is supposed to be the lowest level of functionality. And please correct me if you think otherwise. And of course, you can certainly, in my opinion, based on my 20 years of experience working with user stories, a user story can be broken down into multiple user stories. And in this case, a user story is no longer a user story, but rather it is an epic that you're breaking down. But it can't be a feature because you cannot break it down a user story to features, because features are supposed to be higher level than user stories. Anyway, so we take each one of those and map them or create corresponding user stories in Rommana ALM. So within Rommana ALM, we don't have, we do have epic and features and user stories, but everything is a user story. So we create a user story in the highest level for any epic. We take any feature, we create a user story on the second level and so on, and we take a user story, we create it on the third level. But again, within the user story itself, as you're going to see in the screen, it tells you if this user story has come from an epic or a feature or a user story in ADO. We also take any issue or bug from ADO and create an issue within Rommana ALM. Now, all your entities within ADO have become entities within Rommana ALM. And the reason we do that is to allow you to do all the kind of things that Rommana ALM allow you to do, okay? And of course, because Rommana ALM has the parent-to-child relationship like this, again, I'm sorry, I'm gonna use, hold on, here you go. Okay, so if you look at this screen here, the screen is taken from Rommana ALM, excuse me. Okay, it's taken from Rommana ALM for an actual project that was synced or synchronized from ADO. So here's ADO resync, and any minute you can resync. If you think someone has made changes to your project in ADO, you can resync again to bring other entities if entities have been created, if features have been removed, if epics have been changed, whatever it is. So the resyncing is immediate in real time, but you just have to do it. You have to request it. Okay, Rommana ALM does not go and do it by itself. So as long as you're connected to your ADO project, you can click resync anytime to bring any changes from within ADO into Rommana ALM. As you can see here, within Rommana ALM, it shows you whether a thing, an entity has been an epic. This crown is an epic. This is a feature, and this is a user story. And as you can tell here, the project that we were dealing with had an epic that had a feature below that, and the feature had a number of user stories. And if I were to click the plus sign here, if I were running to the live tool, it would expand this to, I think if I remember correctly, there were 4 user stories under this one user story, which means, as I said, a user story can possibly have other user stories as children of the user story, and in that case, that user story should become an epic. But again, that is how ADO allows you to do. ADO does allow you to create user stories as children of other user stories. In fact, as I said before, the user interface also allows you to create a feature or an epic under a user story, which does not make sense in my opinion. I wish people who are architects of ADO can explain to me why they're allowing that. It's not a good practice at all, but it does. And guess what? If your project within ADO allowed you to do this, I'm going to call it poor practice. When we bring your project into Rommana ALM, we're going to go ahead and allow you to do the same. We're going to create a feature or an epic under a user story. So as you can see, the visual symbols from ADO have been brought into Rommana ALM to show you the type of the entity. And it shows up here. Where does it show? In fact, yes, no, not here. I'll show you in the next screen. If I were to click on any one of those, it'll give me the details of that specific entity, whether it is an epic or a feature or a user story. Okay, but what you're seeing in front of you is the hierarchy of functionality within ADO or within ADO that has been brought into Rommana ALM. Issues and bugs from ADO are not in the hierarchy here because they're not really part of the hierarchy, but they are brought into Rommana ALM under this item here. If I were to click on issues, it would show me all the issues and the bugs that have been brought in from ADO. All right, let's move on to the next screen here. This screen and the next screen show you the details of an entity that has been brought from ADO into Rommana ALM. Okay, so what you're looking at is an epic. Of course, as I said, everything in Rommana ALM is a user story, but this user story, when it was brought from ADO, it was brought from an epic. So it was an epic. So we made sure to show you here, this is an epic in ADO. We brought it here. It becomes a user story. So here's the thing. So in a way, Rommana ALM treats epics, features, and user stories the same way, because the kind of things you can do with any one of those things is the same. Any one of them, as we're going to see on this screen and the next screen, every epic or a feature or a user story will have a title. It will have a description. It'll have acceptance criteria. Of course, you're free to leave those things blank. Okay, and of course, if it is an epic, you may not have acceptance criteria. But if you did have, well, actually, if those acceptance criteria have been defined within Rommana ALM, because ADO does not really allow, and that's one of the things that Rommana ALM allows you to do. Remember, in ADO, you can define acceptance criteria, but you can define them as a piece of text. It does not deal with every acceptance criteria separately. Rommana ALM, on the other hand, allows you to treat to define acceptance criteria as a list of items, and it allows you to define whether each acceptance criteria have been tested or not, and if it has been tested, what is the status, if it is pass or fail. Of course, if it has not been tested yet, then there is no status. But that's one of the things you can do to a user story or an epic or a feature within Rommana ALM. Now, beyond that, there is a number of other things here that ADO does not allow you to do. Things like for example, the version. Where is that? Okay, I'll get to this in a little bit. But if we look down here, and in the next screen is going to show, because the user story screen within Rommana ALM is huge. It has a lot of things, so that's why I put them on two screens here. So this is kind of, I cut the first half of the screen, put it here. So there's a number of things here you can see. All right, there is here you can see the use cases. If you are going to define use cases for a feature or an epic or user story, something that certainly ADO does not allow you to do. You can see here scenarios. You can define scenarios for your feature or epic or user story. Again, something else that ADO does not allow you to do. Because scenario-based development and testing is very powerful when you see it, how it works in Rommana ALM. It shows you all the test sets. It shows you also what we call ad hoc tests or exploratory tests. Again, ADO shows you only one kind of tests. But in Rommana ALM, we allow you to do exploratory tests, and also you can do formal tests. All the formal tests are here and here. So in Rommana ALM, formal testing happens through test sets which consist of test cases. However, if you're not interested, or if there are some scenarios that you wanted to test them using exploratory tests, then they are here. Okay, all the issues related to this user stories are here. Okay, if you were to click up here on issues, that shows you all the issues within your projects. But if you were to click here, it will show you only the issues that are related to this user story, which means when we wrote this user story and we started to work with it, before even we write the code, before we even execute anything, someone might discover a problem with the user story itself. Well, guess what? That problem can be declared here as an issue. All right. After the code is written, the code is executed, then someone might discover that, something is not working, which is a bug. That's also here. So again, one more time, the difference between this issue icon here and this issue here, this is all the issues for the project. This is all the issues for this specific entity. So everything you see on this screen and the next screen are about this user story. Okay, there are all the tasks associated with this user story. There are all the risks, there are all the actions, and all these things, these three entities here, tasks, risks, and actions are entities within what we call feature-based project management. The feature-based project management allow you to do these kind of things. And because ADO does not allow you to do this, we allow you to do this within Rommana ALM. Again, one more time, we're trying to protect your investment within ADO. All right, we do not want you to abandon ADO, because certainly ADO does a lot of wonderful things that you can continue to do them the way you are used to doing them. We don't want you to use Rommana ALM to replace ADO, but we want you to sort of a supplement or complement ADO with the features from Rommana ALM. So all the things I'm mentioning here, they do not happen they're not allowed in ADO. You have also here all the document management, and the documents here again are different from documents up here, because these are all the documents and models within your projects. Here are all the documents that are related to this specific user story. Any discussion in the about this user stories are here between team members. All right. If you are interested to see the parent user story or the parent epic or the parent feature of this user story, it is here. And the last thing here, if you'd like to see all the children of this user story, it's here. Now, of course, we created these two icons here, although you can actually, I'm going to go now to the previous screen, you can actually see them here. So if I'm looking at this epic, for example, I can see that this epic does not have a parent, but I can see it has a child here. If I'm looking at this user stories, I can click on this plus sign and see all the children of this user story. Well, if you're not looking at this screen anymore, but rather you are looking at this screen, we don't want you to go back. We allow you to see the children from this screen. Okay, but you could also go back to here. You see that? It says back to the tree view. If you go back to the tree view, then it shows you the hierarchy one more time. But we don't want you to go back and forth between two screens. All right, I'm going to go forward. We have not finished all the kind of things you can do within Rommana ALM yet. So I'm going to go forward to the next screen. This is the remaining of the user story screen. As I said, I could not just put both of them in one on one slide. Okay. So I already talked about that. You can see now the number I've changed it because, and the number, by the way, up here show that if you click on it, that tells you that, for example, this user story has 24 scenarios. It has 24 ad hoc tests. It has 2 test sets. All right. It has 7 issues. So if you click on any one of those icons, it has 1 use case. It has 4 tasks and 1 risk, and so on. So these are additional things you can do within Rommana ALM, okay, that you cannot do within ADO. For example, here is the history of the changes that happened to this user story over time. So it shows you, for example, it has 6 changes over time. And if I were to click on this history, I'll see all the 6 changes and who made the change and when and why and all that stuff. ADO does not allow you to maintain a history of the changes. What's down here is very interesting thing. This is a change request. This handles the change management stuff when a user story changes over time. As we're going to see in a little bit, you can have a change request that causes a new version of the user story to be created. This specific user story does not have any change requests, and it does not, and as a result, it does not have any version except the original version. So when we create a user story for the first time, it's the first version. It's a version 1. If a change request has been created and has been approved and has been used to create another version of the user story, then it would show you here that you have 2 versions, the original one and the one that was created based on the change request. Change management is a very strong thing. It's a very powerful thing in software engineering. I don't see how any project can work without a change management. All right, what else? There are things that are going to take time to explain. The functional components. This is what functional components are related to this user story. I can explain them under in a different webinar. If you have any question about any one of those and you want me to elaborate, please let me know. All the online reviews of the user stories are here because Rommana ALM allows you to initiate a review of a user story or an epic or whatever, and it keeps a track of all the interactions between the team members regarding that user stories. Here is something interesting. Here is what we call the approval authority. Assuming that you work in a larger project and a user story or an epic or whatever needs to be reviewed and approved, after it gets reviewed here, you might have a protocol, certain protocol by which a user story must be approved. Otherwise, it cannot go for implementation. And again, I learned this the hard way when I worked with larger projects with government contractors and the government projects, because nothing can move on to development before it gets approved by stakeholders and the project managers and so on. So in here, you can define what we call the approval authorities for this user story. And of course, you can apply the same approval authorities to other user stories as you wish. Because when you click on this, it takes you to a screen where you define the approval authority, and it gives you the option to say, I want this approval authority protocol that I'm defining here to apply to all other user stories, which makes it simple. The approval authority, or when you define approval authority, you can define things like whether this needs to be approved or not, and if it needs to be approved, who is supposed to approve it? Is it more than one person, or it is only one person who should approve it? If it is more than one person who are supposed to approve it, for example, the customer and the product owner, for example, then you have to say, you can also say, not you have to say, you can also say whether any one of them can approve it or both of them must approve it. And if both of them must approve it, then you can specify the order in which the approval should take place. It's a very sophisticated approval protocol that Rommana ALM allows you to do for anything, for requirements, for user story, for anything. Because, as I said, when you work with large project with a lot of bureaucracy, that's the way it works. I've witnessed the same thing when I worked with medical devices. Of course, if you work on a simple project, no approval authorities, then you can ignore that. Okay, but this is for those of us who work in projects that require this, which ADO does not at all allow you to do. I'm not saying anything bad about ADO, but every tool has its own limitations. It just, we built Rommana ALM kind of does not have much of limitations there. It allows you to do a lot of things that other tools would not allow you to do. I mean, we all are familiar with the concept of reuse in user stories. Some user stories are or can be reused within other user stories. Okay, so here, if I were to click on this, it will show me the list of other user stories that have been reused within this user story. All right, because if you define a user story one time and then you define another user story that you feel part of it can be another user story, then you can reuse it so that you can reuse, so developers can reuse the code. This is different here. This is what other stories are related somehow to this user story we're looking at. Remember, again, the context here is that everything in this screen and the previous screen has to do with one user story. We're not talking about the whole project here. Okay, so this is for example showing me that the user story I am looking at has 3 other related user stories. And if I were to click on this icon, it will show me the 3 user stories. Not only that, it will show me the nature of the relationship. How are they related? So for example, if there is another user story that must be tested at the same time this user story is tested, well, that relationship needs to be shown. If I have another user story that must be implemented or coded first before this user story I'm looking at can be coded, then that relationship must be shown, and so on. Custom attributes, most tools would allow you to do this, but again, you can define custom attributes. Custom attributes are more and beyond what the standard attributes are. Any attribute you want to define that's not built-in attribute within Rommana ALM, you can define them here. Of course, the source of the user story is here. Of course, if the user story was brought in from ADO, if you click on this, it will show you that this brought from ADO. But again, we have this here because in general, you can create a user story that came from a certain document, that came during certain meeting, that came because there was a change in another user story that caused this user story to exist, and so on. I think this is a lot already that I'm telling you, and I've used already 36 minutes of my hour. Because we still have a lot to do. So in the next slides, we have details in every one of those. I don't think I'm going to have time to go through all the details, but I'll go through as much as I can. But this is really, in a nutshell, everything that Rommana ALM allows you to do for entities that you have in your ADO. Okay? So now, this is how scenario-based development and testing work within Rommana ALM. Okay, so briefly, I'm not going to get into all the details. If any epic or a feature or user story that that was brought in from ADO to Rommana ALM, you can take it and create scenarios. Okay, and there is so much details about scenarios there. Scenarios are very critical things. I know ADO does not allow you to define scenarios. If you want to learn about how scenarios are powerful for testing and development, please go ahead and watch one of my webinars on scenario-based development and testing that's posted on the Rommana website. Scenarios are positive and negative. Here, as you can see, some of the stuff here. So some scenarios are normal, some scenarios are not normal. The abnormal scenarios and the negative scenarios are for negative testing. The positive scenarios or the normal scenarios are for positive testing, and so on. But once you define scenarios, and again, the whole scenario stuff leads to the behavior-driven development approach as well. So you can do a number of things here. You can take a scenario and build formal test cases, or you can take a scenario and build exploratory test cases, or you can take a scenario and build code in a test-driven development. Remember, developers can do test-driven development, and right now they do their test-driven development based on a user story, and I totally rejected that. I totally rejected that approach. You cannot do test-driven development based on the user story. Why? Because the user story is still incomplete. It is ambiguous. It's not giving you enough details. So I strongly suggest that developers who are doing test-driven development, and instead of taking a user story and try to do this, they take the user story, break it down into scenarios the way Rommana ALM does scenarios. Only after they do their scenarios, they can go and start writing their code and starting their test cases, and then they write the code for those test cases. You understand that if you know test-driven development, we first write the test case, then we write the code that will pass the test case. If the test case does not pass, we go back and modify the code. If the test case passes, then we go and write another test case. But I suggest that you do all these two boxes, not based on a user story, but rather based on scenarios. This is what I refer to as scenario-based test-driven development. Scenario-based test-driven development. All right? So, and again, if you decide to do formal test cases, then you can group your test cases into test sets, and you start writing your automated or manual test scripts here. This is in a nutshell how scenario-based development and testing work. Let me go forward. Okay, this slide explains to you why we need scenario-based development and testing. It gives you the benefits. And again, I gave a link to a webinar here. If you go to the rommanasoftware.com, look at the recorded webinars there, and you listen to the webinar on scenario-based development and testing. Okay, but again, I'm not going to take the time here to explain to you why scenario-based development and testing are critical to any project. Most importantly, it allows you to do risk-based testing, which no other approach allows you to do. As I said earlier, we never have time to test everything we have to test. So scenario-based development and testing will allow you to select the most critical scenarios and create test cases for that. Okay. And most importantly, the risk-based testing is done on the scenario level. I see test teams are doing scenario risk-based testing based on the test cases, meaning that they take the time and write the test cases, and then after that they go and they try to decide which test cases are more critical than others. Well, that's to me ridiculous. Why? Because you have already taken the time to design your tests. Don't do that. Don't do that. The approach here allows you to do your risk-based testing on the scenarios before you even put one line in test cases. Because the scenarios you decide that are not risky enough and you're not going to test them, you don't need to create test cases. There's no point to create test cases and later on decide that those test cases are not important, so we're not going to run them. Okay, got my point? All right, further. How do we create issues for epics and features and user stories within Rommana ALM? Remember, I said issues and the bugs that existed in your project in ADO have been already brought into Rommana ALM. But once you start using Rommana ALM, you start running your test cases like here. This part of the diagram is in the previous slide. So you create scenarios, then you create some formal test cases, then you run the test case, and the test case passes or fail. Okay, you have the option here to create an issue report, which could be a bug or something else within Rommana ALM, or you could go ahead and create your issue or your bug in ADO if you want. But then when you synchronize or resynchronize your project with ADO, it will bring them in. So it's up to you really at this point. Once you start synchronizing your ADO projects with Rommana ALM, it's up to you to create your issues and your bugs within ADO or within Rommana ALM. If you are going to continue to use ADO for your projects, then I suggest that you create your issues and your bugs within ADO and rerun the resynchronization to bring those ADO. You could also, just based on the review of an epic or a user story, you can create issue reports because an issue report could be an issue within about this feature that has nothing to do with the execution. You did not write test cases yet. All right. You could also write, as I said earlier, you could write an exploratory test case or exploratory test sets, execute them, and if they fail, you write issue reports. Okay, these are the different ways by which you create issue reports within Rommana ALM. All right, what you see in front of you here is the concept of risk-based testing in Rommana ALM. As I said earlier, minutes ago, that if you use scenarios in Rommana ALM, you can do your risk-based testing based on the scenarios, not based on test cases, and not based on the user stories. Interestingly enough, I've seen also people doing risk-based testing based on the user stories. They come and say, okay, let's look at the user stories. Which user story is more important than others? What? I mean, a user story would not be there if it is not important. So how are you going to choose what to test and what not to test based on the level of importance or the level of criticality of a user story? So again, I'm gonna repeat this one more time. Doing risk-based testing based on the user story is totally dumb idea. Doing risk-based testing based on the test case level is also another dumb idea, because you already wasted time to write your test cases. After that, you're going to decide that those test cases you wrote, you're not going to execute. Well, that's not smart. That's not a good way of using your resources and your effort. That's why I strongly suggest you do your risk-based testing on the scenario level. Okay, so this screen is right from Rommana ALM. It's showing you for a given user story, the list of scenarios there. There's a scenario number, the scenario name, the scenario description, and it shows you the 3 factors that we use to decide whether the scenario is gonna be tested or not. Those 3 factors are here: frequency of occurrence, how often this scenario is going to happen, consequences or impact of failure, and the probability of failure. Again, I don't have much time to explain those, but you can learn more about those in my webinar on scenario-based development and testing. So high, that's if you calculate the average is 3. High, low, the average is 2.3. And that's simply by considering high is 3, medium is 2, and low is 1. So I don't see medium here anywhere, but that's okay. If I had a medium, then it would be 2. So here I have everything is high here for the first 2 columns. Interesting. All right. So as you can see here, so based on this number that we call it testing priority, you can determine which scenarios are more critical to test than others. Again, all the details about risk-based testing are explained in my scenario on on my webinar on scenario-based development and testing. All right, as I said earlier, Rommana ALM allows you to specify acceptance criteria one by one. It's a list of items. As I said here, once you bring your user story into Rommana ALM, you can go ahead and define your acceptance criteria, and for each acceptance criteria, it allows you to specify whether it has been tested or not, and if it has, then what is the status. Again, I have not seen one single tool, Jira or ADO or anything that allow you to do this. Okay, this is about the change requests and versioning within Rommana ALM. Once you bring an epic or a feature or a user story from ADO to Rommana ALM, if changes happen to one of those things, you can create what's called a change request. Normally in software engineering, a change request must be approved by stakeholders before we can do anything with it. All right. Once it goes through the approval protocols and gets approved, you can use a change request in one of 2 ways. Either someone can look at the change request and say, okay, that change request really has nothing to do with any existing user story, but rather it's really it calls for a new, different user story. Well, that's what happens here. So you can actually create a new user story or a new epic or a new feature based on a change request. Now, the question that people ask all the time, do I create this feature or this user story within Rommana ALM or within ADO? As I always say, if you're going to continue to protect your investment in ADO and you're going to continue to use your ADO for your project, then I suggest that you create that new user story or epic or feature within ADO and run the resynchronization again to bring it to Rommana ALM. Because remember, if you build it in Rommana ALM, it would not exist in ADO. It will only exist in Rommana ALM. All right. The other way in which you can use a change request after it has been approved, someone can say, okay, we need to take the existing user story and make changes to it. But because that user story is already in development, we're not going to change it, but rather we are going to create a new version of that user story. So now the user story has two versions. One is the original version that is going into development, and the other one is the new version, and we have version numbers. So right away, the first version is called version 1. The newly created version is version 2. And version 2 can be planned for future sprints or iterations. Now, this process can continue. Someone can go ahead and get another change request that will be approved, and they can go back and say, oh, it is the same user story, and we need to create a new version. Okay, so we could possibly take one user story, create multiple versions out of that. Or, interestingly enough, if we created a new version of an existing user story, and that new version already went into development and testing, and then we got another change request that has been approved, it might call for a new version for the version we're working on. So that new version, version 2, can also have a version out of that. So basically you can create versions, or the way versioning work in Rommana ALM. You can create versions of an existing user story or versions of existing user stories. It doesn't stop. It's almost a hierarchy, another hierarchy. So it's the same user story. You can have multiple versions for it. Okay. All right. If you have any question about that, please let me know. All right. This is use cases. If your project is formal enough to use what's called the use cases, and you probably know use cases are very different from user stories. Use cases have a lot of details. It's a much more disciplined way of building software. Okay. Again, I don't have the time here to explain what a use case is and how different it is from a user story. But here's how we do it. An epic or a feature or a user story that has been brought from ADO into Rommana ALM, you can go ahead and create a use case for that. And then the use case has built into it what's called use case scenarios, similar to the scenarios we just mentioned. And you can use case scenarios in the same way you can create formal test cases or exploratory test cases. I'm just letting you know that if you want to use use cases and you are using ADO will not allow you to do use cases. So you can do the synchronization with Rommana ALM. You can start doing your use cases from within Rommana ALM. This slide and the upcoming slides have to do with the feature-based project management. This specific slide talks about how you can create tasks, risks, and actions for epic or a feature or a user story. And keep in mind, those are all Rommana ALM entities. They're not ADO entities. So risks here, for example, are anything that could happen possibly that would hinder us from delivering that feature or that user story on time as we thought we would. Okay, tasks are all the tasks that we need to do in order to perform or to deliver this feature or that user story, and so on. Actions are things like the action item lists that other than development. So these actions are things like, contacting a third party, looking for a reusable component, doing things like that. Talk to another manager about this user story. Any action item list should be included here. Okay. And you can create those for any epic or a feature or a user story. But that prepares for what we call feature-based project management. Continuing with that, non-functional requirements, okay, which means requirements or user stories that are not functionality, okay. As you can see here, Rommana ALM allows you, this is the same hierarchy I showed you in the very first slide, but the difference here is that it shows you all the functionalities, and that includes everything that has been brought in from ADO. But it also allows you to specify other types of user stories. Things like quality, things like hardware requirements, implementation constraints, regulations, if you're working on a project for a regulated industry. So I guess Rommana ALM is flexible enough to allow you to specify other kind of user stories or requirements that are not functionality requirements, okay? Again, with that, I'm going to leave it here because it's another area that requires a lot of details. This is the mapping between an epic or a feature or a user story to business functions. Business functions. Every user story, when we write it, it touches on certain business functions. Again, one thing that ADO and many other tools do not allow you to do. Rommana ALM will allow you to do this, and this is a traceability, kind of traceability matrix that shows you how to do this. And this is done in real time. If this is user story, if you find that user story relates to this, so you click here to create a relationship and so on. All right, I have 3 minutes left. Right, what you see in front of you is the timeline from Rommana ALM for any project within Rommana ALM, whether it was created in Rommana ALM or it was brought in from ADO. This timeline, as you can see, it shows you for every requirement or user story what tasks we have and when the task will be completed. Okay, this is different from what Jira does and what other tools does, and including ADO, of course. I mean, we don't say this user story has been completed or not completed. It doesn't make sense. A user story has a lot of things that happen. It has prototyping as a task. We prototype the user story. We review the prototype with customers. We have meetings we conduct. We have tested design we have to do. We have user interface design. Every user story has, we refer to those within Rommana ALM as tasks. So it's, when it comes to talking about the status or the timeline of a user story, we have to say what features are, what tasks we need to do and which task has been completed. In fact, this chart here, it's actually a live report. But of course, as you can see, I've taken an image and put it on the slide. If you click on any one of those, it brings another screen with the details. It says here, this is the test design. Okay, all right. So if you click on that, it shows you who is doing the test design and how many hours we allocated for test design and how many hours they already spent and the percentage of completion of this test design. It does this for every task. That's very critical. This kind of timeline that you see in Rommana ALM does not exist in any project management tool out there. Certainly not Jira, certainly not Microsoft Project, nothing that I know of, which shows you a project timeline, task by task, user story by user story. Okay, again, if you need to learn more about this, please review my webinar on feature-based project management. This is a report from Rommana ALM that shows you what we call the test coverage, user story test coverage. It shows you for every user story how many tests were written, how many of them have been passed, how many them have failed, how many of them have not been executed yet, and it calculates what we call the percentage of completion and percentage of readiness. Again, you will see this in my webinar on feature-based project management. This is estimation within Rommana ALM. Estimation by user story for every task. Okay. So here, this user story has those tasks, and each task, it gives you how many hours was estimated, what's the actual hours, and estimated cost, and actual cost, and percentage of deviation, and so on. But it does, as you can see, it gives you the estimates for every user story, for every task within the user story. And of course, it adds this up down here. I'm sorry. I have few minutes left. If you're willing to stay with me, I'm going to finish this quick. So it adds a total at the bottom. Okay, I'm going to pass document management for now. These are all the reports within Rommana ALM that you can have just once you start using Rommana ALM, whether you synchronize your projects with ADO or not. And you can imagine they're grouped by project management reports, user story reports, test management reports, and so on. It's a comprehensive set of reports, and I think this is the last slide I'm going to show you, which is a sort of a, whatever you want to call it. It's a dashboard that shows you everything within your project, and it's configurable. You can decide what you'd like to see in the dashboard, and of course you can scroll up and down. You can scroll left and right to see other data. All right. Thank you so much for being with me today. This is the conclusion of my webinar. So synchronization will bring your projects from ADO into Rommana ALM. It will protect your investment in ADO, and you will not replace ADO by Rommana ALM. You will continue to use ADO as long as you want, but then you would enjoy all the features of Rommana ALM for your ADO projects. Okay. I'm looking here to see if there's any questions. I don't see any question, which means everything I've said is acceptable. Thanks for being with me. Please, I think my webinar on feature-based project management is coming in about 2 or 3 weeks from now. I can't remember. All right, thank you.